A night elf is probably not only a derogatory term for easy elf girls that warm your bed at night, but also a very great concept for another elven subspecies that, as the name would suggest, is night active. Now the question then is, why? Why would elves choose to be night active? What is the reason for this evolutionary adaptation, and how would it affect their entire civilization? And in our own world, species are usually nocturnal because of predation and competition with other species, and rather than fighting a losing battle, they avoid conflict by becoming active when their competitors or predators are asleep. Which means if this is truly the case for why night elves are night active, and if they are not simply, for example, cursed or under the influence of an evil god, or just play video games all night, this would mean that the fantasy world in which night elves actually exists needs some pretty powerful and pretty dangerous predators that would be a danger to even the mighty elves with their spells and their speed and their sense of perfection and their age-old wisdom. And the kind of predators that stalk the day could be incredibly epic, like dragons, giants, a Tarrasque or two. Perhaps their homeland is located in the flat arable land around a huge mountain chain, where vicious wyverns would descend during the day, carried by the hot air currents, and return to their resting and nesting places high in the mountains by dusk, posing a huge threat during the entire day. Or their home is perhaps located in the desert, and during the day temperatures become too hot to dwell on the surface, or vicious fire elementars form due to the heat, and fake mana that pools in the endless dunes. My point is, there could be all manners of cool and epic monsters that overshadow even the mighty elven race completely. Or they could just be confronted with a small, sneaky and rather unspectacular danger, like goblins. But since goblins outbreed the elves, they might be forced into a nocturnal lifestyle, which in my opinion would be one of the more lame explanations, especially because goblins are often depicted as nocturnal as well, for example the night goblins of Warhammer Fantasy, who choose this lifestyle in order to avoid the bigger and stronger orcs. But in any case, now that they are night active, what would make them distinct from the other elves? And what would their civilization look like? Well, first and foremost, the elves would be either very pale, since without exposure to the sunlight, melanin production, as a way of defense, isn't really necessary or needed. Or they could have even slightly bluish or grey skin colors, as to better blend into the dim moonlit night. As for their eyesight, it would be very keen, but likely not only in the sense that, for example, a cat eye is, because while cats can and will make use of the dim moonlit night, the night elves might also have something akin to infrared or heat vision, something that works even in moonless nights and perfect darkness. And their sense of hearing could be especially acute, even when compared to other elves, and perhaps their sense of touch is also quite advanced, as in they could sense the tremors of someone walking by from half a mile away, or perhaps they, much like migratory birds, can navigate the entire planet via its magnetosphere. There are all manners of really cool and distinct concepts to make the night elves really strange and odd, yet also again quite mysterious and impressive. Of course, not everything needs to be used, but I would feel a bit sad if none of these cool options are actually employed. And with that said, let's get to the social aspect. Now, right off the bat, every child will learn that the day is dangerous, that, if you will, the day is bright and full of terrors. They will learn of behemoths stalking the land, of dragons ruling the sky, of giant creatures in the water that come out at day and dive into the depths at night. And everybody will ensure that everybody else will not venture out during the day. Except perhaps for a few selected really powerful warriors, daywalkers, sundifiers, light eaters. These brave, adventurous and more often than not foolish individuals could be the elite of the elven warriors, and perhaps a requirement for them to join this elite order would be to fight against one of the many dangers the day holds, and live to tell the tale. But generally speaking, the society of the Night Elves might not be that different from our own. They could still have a medieval society, with peasants being like 90% of the overall population, but they would just work at night, which for farming might not be all that bad, considering that things like irrigation would be a lot more effective at dusk, when the sun is already gone, and therefore less water can be made to evaporate by its warming rays. But I think if avian, wyvern or draconic predators are the reason for why the Night Elves only come out at night, then their homes might not be simple farmhouses, but more like underground burrows, built, well, underground, like under a tree, or something that can be used to stabilize the soil in rural areas, with fertile but loose soil. Or they would have to bring in rocks and stones from the mountains, bind the mass of rubble together with either spells or more likely just fire magic that heats up and partially melts the mass so that it can fuse together. A bunch of sharpened metal, rock or wooden spikes would also be used to dissuade any airborne predator from even landing near these vital settlements. And perhaps odorous plants could be used to cover the smell of Night Elves. And in the case of them being nearly completely bound to a life underground, like the Falmer of the Elder Scrolls series, they still would need a way of producing food. Perhaps light is directed via a network of mirrors into the interior of the tunnels, so crops can be grown amidst the safety of the mountains. Perhaps they live off potatoes, carrots and other plants that they can actually cultivate from below the ground. Basically like moles able to practice agriculture. Or perhaps Night Elves are magical constructs, golems that feed on rock and metals of the mountains and the underground, and therefore they don't need conventional agriculture as we know it. The possibilities are endless. And then there's the question of how the Night Elves that manage to travel to less dangerous parts of the world would behave. Are they perhaps able and very sought after night watchmen and guards? Do they have a intrinsic fear of sunlight? There are so many cool and unique aspects to them that need exploration in any story containing them. And with that said, now it's your turn. What do you think about Night Elves and how they would actually work? Why the Night Elves would be night active, and how their society would function? Let me know it down in the comment section. And while you type, I say thank you very much for watching and have a nice day.